Hi, I'm Craig Pauley, Sharpening Pro with Human Nature. In this episode of Bushcraft Basics, I'd like to talk about what you need and how to start a fire. Fire is one of the main things we need to survive in the wilderness, and it keeps away the boogeyman, saber-toothed tigers, it purifies our water, heats us, cooks our food, and there's just something that is soothing about it that everybody likes to sit around the campfire and enjoy. There's three main things you need to start a fire, and you need to get these well ahead of time and try to keep them dry if at all possible. You need tinder. Tinder is basically anything that will take a spark. A cotton ball soaked in petroleum works excellent, and it's very cheap to make. Fat wood, and I'll show you how to process a piece of fat wood, like this large stump right there, down to something you can shave and it will take a spark. And then you need your kindling, which is basically any dry sticks or shaves or split sticks that are about matchstick to thumb size. And then you can also use pine cones. Here's some digger pine cones that work real good as kindling. And then your fuel. Your fuel could be any log from thumb on up to however big a log you can cut down. This is what fat wood from a stump looks like in the wild. It is basically just a cut down tree. It can be a fallen tree, large branches off trees. They have to be pine. And the existing sap in the roots of the tree keep wicking up into the stump of the remaining wood and saturating it to a point where it's full of turpentine and the bugs don't touch it anymore and it's waterproof. So all of the unsaturated wood rots away and everything else around it is just totally rotten. But not that. And it's saturated with turpentine, which makes it waterproof and impervious to insects. So it lasts forever. It's really heavy for its size. And this is basically the bottom piece of that. See if I can get a piece off of here. And if you could smell this, you'd smell it. It's just like buying a bottle of turpentine. And all these little pieces work great for it. Now when you have a knife that has a Scandi grind or a chisel grind on one side, there's only a primary bevel, no secondary bevel. On this side I have a secondary bevel, so this is the only side I need to sharpen. This enables that part of the knife to lay flat against the wood and make very fine shavings if you want. And you can't do that with very easily with a knife that has two secondary bevels on both sides, because it's very difficult to hold the correct angle. This kind of does it for you. And once you get your wood fairly flat, and when you lift the knife tip up or down, it will make the curl go left or right depending on it. And the knives I make, all my knives, are made for either left or right-handed person, so it utilizes the correct stroke. But once you get it flat, you can get some nice curls. This is going to be kindling. And kindling is, there's different definitions, but pretty much anything from about matchstick or pencil size up to maybe thumb size, and that's your kindling. And that gets your bigger fuels going. But you never want to get it off the ground because it gets moisture and it gets cold. So it's got to be hot to burn and get to a part where it's hot. But it stays dry under there, and a lot of the time the canopy shields it from the rain so it's even drier. Plus the wind blows by it and dries it right out. And if they snap, and they don't just bend, but if they snap off clean, then that's really good kindling. And these just snap. Right next to all the poison up too. probably plenty to start a fire now, but if you're in a really bad situation where it's windy and wet or snowy or icy, you're going to want a bundle that you can barely put your fingers around and at least arm's length. And then we'll break it and split it into two, and I'll show you how to start the fire. Okay. The first main thing is to build a base for your fire to keep it off the ground. You want to keep the moisture and the cold from the ground and insulate it from it. So you can use bark, you can use make a little raft out of sticks. You can basically use anything that's dry. And you want to have your wood over top the tinder, so when the tinder ignites, the flames actually immediately start heating the wood. If it was really bad weather out, windy, rainy, wet, snowy, whatever, you'd probably want 3 times as much tinder as this, and at least arm's length. So if you break it into a decent bundle, like I said, you have to have the wood over top the flame or it won't ignite. So you gotta kind of fix up your bundle, and just a little bit of air going through it, maybe pencil width between each stick works pretty good. But the pieces that are way out on the ends, they're not going to get any heat, so they're not doing any good to get it started. So you basically get them together right above where your tinder is, and that'll ignite and get everything going. And you don't want to mess around when you're starting a fire, because when it really counts, you might only have a little bit of tinder. That's the hardest part to find. So you want to make sure that you're prepared. I'm going to make a little shaving, hopefully, of a little stick of the fat wood that I'm going to use as a match. And it'll burn just like a candle. And there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about how to strike. You see people on TV how to strike a fire and how to do all the different skills. And you'll see guys strike from back here and do this for 5 minutes before they get something going, which destroys your knife and whittles down your steel. Plus, when they're striking it like this or pulling this back, it can knock your tinder bundle over, and that might be the only tinder you have, period. You might just have a little bit of cattail, and that's all you got. So you don't want to waste it. So if you put this down right on top or next to your tinder, so it's real close, you can use the tip of this knife, or you can use back here, whatever's convenient. I use my thumb well away from the blade, put a slight angle on it, maybe close to 45, not quite 45, and you just push down like that, and one strike. And you don't have to panic, it's not going to go anywhere. Put your knife away so it's safe, get your little match lit, which is fat wood, and just stick it in. Put your fire steel away so you don't lose anything. And it's that simple. And when it's pouring rain, I've done this in the snow, I've done big fires on log rafts, and do it the same way with fat wood. I'll show you some other ways with tinder, but basically once you get your tinder lit, that's the hard part. To make the petroleum cotton balls, all you need is a handful of 100% cotton balls. They can't be synthetic. You need a Ziploc bag and some petroleum jelly, whatever brand you want. Take about, probably 6 or 8 cotton balls. And if they're usually they're big enough where you can split them in half. And you can't split them in half lengthwise because they're really strong when the fibers are running that way. You do sideways, whatever works, and split them in half, and that's plenty. And just split them all in half. And when you got enough of them split in half, you'll take the Ziploc and we'll fill it full of petroleum jelly. If you do it right, you don't even get any of the stuff on your fingers. Take the lid off. I usually take the bag, turn inside out, reach in and get a pretty healthy amount. So about like that. And don't put all the balls in, put about 2/3 or so. And then zip it up. Take most of the air out of it, and then you start working it together until it's saturated. If they're too slick and there's petroleum jelly on them to where it's oozing off, then you add a couple more cotton balls. If they get too dry, then add just a little bit more petroleum jelly. You want them to where they feel oily, but they're not to where it's dripping off the outside. And you got to do this for about 5 or 10 minutes before they really get saturated. After a few more minutes of this, we'll test one out and see how long it burns. A lot of the time they'll burn around 5 minutes just for half a cotton ball. If you're in a situation where you really need to make sure it starts immediately, use 2 of them. And it doesn't take very much room to carry some of these. You can carry them in a Ziploc, you can carry them in a little match case. I carry some around my neck to make sure I always have some with me. And this and a piece of fat wood and your Bushcraft knife with a fire steel is pretty much all you need to get a fire going anywhere. Cotton balls are one of my favorite. I always carry a little vial around my neck with a striker when we go out kayaking, hunting, camping, hiking, whatever we do. And then that way we can always start a fire, and it doesn't take up any space. You take a cotton ball, and I'll show you how to make these, but there's a way to pull them apart. There's like a grain. If you pull it the wrong way, it's pretty strong. If you pull it against the grain, it pulls apart and makes a bunch of fuzzies. Don't squish the fuzzies. You can keep the fuzzies like that, and that's what ignites. If you're lucky enough to have pine cones, I'll show you how to start a fire with just a cotton ball and pine cones, which works exceptionally well. I like to use the steels made by Light My Fire. The ferrocerium rod itself, it's not a flint, it's actually a mish metal of magnesium and different things, but it sparks the quickest and easiest from a short stroke. And if your match is ready, just like before, you get your fire steel right up by the fuzzies, right next to it or barely on it, and then you can just put your knife at a 45-degree angle and rotate down, push firmly against the steel, and it'll make a spark. Now you got your match going. Take that, put it in with your other cotton ball, and these are going to burn for minutes, so there's no major rush. So you get it in there, get your pine cones right on it, and they'll start burning. And you can put more sticks under there and fat wood or whatever you got. But you can also, just a piece of dried pine sap, or even soggy, you put that in there, and those will burn like crazy. Make sure you always put your knife and your steel away so you don't lose it and you don't hurt yourself. When you put your knife away, make sure you don't stab yourself and you don't force it into a sheath. Plastic or leather, or even this one that's a plasticized leather, so it's completely waterproof. Still, if on a sharp knife like this with this kind of point, you could go into the sheath and hurt yourself. So you just wiggle it in until it sets itself, and then you can push it home. This has a pressure fit, so it has to be pulled free, and it won't rattle out, or even if you do a handstand, it's not going to flop out. And you make sure you put your steel away. Put the elastic around the bottom, and that's it. Okay. This knife itself has a special, well, first it's got an attachment system that I add on that you can put under your belt, on your backpack, and whatever you're wearing. And this way it lowers it enough to where your backpack belt won't be under the knife. And that way you can always wear it and have it with you. And if you want to tie it to your leg, there's always a lanyard hole here. That way it keeps it from moving as much, and when you pull up on your knife, it pulls out instead of pulling the whole knife up. There's no snaps that go through against the steel. The way I designed it is there's snaps through the loop, kind of like an old pistol holster style. And this way it makes it so I can pop those off and put this around any belt, on a backpack, or on a bag, whatever you want. And it makes it real universal. You need 3 things to have a fire. It's like it's living. You need oxygen, heat, and fuel. If any one of those things are out of the scenario, it will not work. So you have to have all 3 things. And if it's cold out, the fire's not going to burn very well. Or if it's getting cooled off from the ground or moisture, it won't work very well. If you have your wood too close together and oxygen can't get through it, it'll smother. It won't work very well. A good bushcraft knife is the #1 tool you need to start a fire and to do most of the bushcraft skills in the outdoors. If you have a saw, it makes it easier and more convenient. If you have a hatchet and an axe, it also makes it easier and more convenient. But you can do most of the same things with an axe if you have the knowledge and a good bushcraft knife. Thank you for watching my video. For more bushcraft basics and gear, visit me at humannaturegear.com. For more information about knives and sharpening services, visit sharpeningpros.com.